It was absolute hell. It was torture. It was brainwashing, mind control, the whole lot. Psyops, gaslighting. He was a master of manipulation. We had sex one time to consummate the marriage. I got pregnant. He never touched me again. For the next 8 years, there was no physical intimacy at all. I lost touch with who I was. I didn't trust my intuition because he would say, I know you better than you know yourself. So, I have to override my instincts and my intuition. And then there's all the mind games within the group. So he stays.
Yes.
Well, how to know you're in a cult is to know that you're not free.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, Life as We See podcast. On today's episode, I have another exciting, amazing guest. Her name is Isabella Young. Welcome, Isabella.
Thank you, Zuki. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a guest on your podcast. And I'm really looking forward to sharing my story and answering some questions and, letting people know a bit about what I learned from my experiences.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So Isabella Young is Isabella Young, B.Ed, M.Ed, studied and taught physical education, outdoor education, health and exercise physiology to undergraduates and postgraduates in Victoria, Australia. She was a pioneer in the establishment, development, and research of therapeutic outdoor education programs in Australia and a founder of Outdoors Incorporated, which is a non-profit organization. She's going to be sharing her story with us around, cults and all that. So I'll just let her go right into it. Isabella, if you don't mind, as you feel comfortable, please share, tell us about yourself, your background, what was growing up like, how did you get involved in this, messianic cult, I think you called it. Yeah, we want to hear.
I grew up in Australia and my family was what I'm calling my first cult. It wasn't actually a cult as we know it, but it functioned as a cult. My mother had a narcissistic personality disorder and she was an alcoholic and created a lot of really distressing family dynamics. She triangulated my brothers and I and really caught up in a lot of her own drama, and she broke up the family. And so my childhood was, on the outside, it looked very nice. We had, a nice home and I had tennis lessons and it looked sort of lovely and normal on the outside, but actually inside the home it was extremely toxic and there was a lot of fighting and yelling and insults and things like that. And my main escape was to be in nature. And so I rode horses and I did camping and just a lot of snow skiing and bushwalking, things like that. So that was like my solace, was to be in nature. And through that passion, I studied to be an outdoor education teacher, which is teaching all those activities, bushwalking, climbing, skiing. And through that, I met a man who became my first husband. And he was extremely, just a brilliant man. He was very funny and very a brave spiritual warrior, as well as he trained with the SAS. So anyway, he really opened my eyes to there being more to this world than just that can be sensed through our five senses. Because in addition to my mother's other shortcomings, she was an atheist. She was a very devout atheist and she hated God. And she had us believing that anyone who believed in God or a higher power was somehow a defective human being. And so I had this superior attitude that somehow I knew better than everybody else who was caught up in this God business. And once I met Barry, basically that was when I had my spiritual awakening and saw more of life than what I'd seen before. And we started our life together. He was also working in the outdoors and we had a child and we were living on a farm and approaching a level of self-sufficiency that I'd always wanted. He had started his own company. I was 3 months pregnant with our second child and he went off to work one day. And I got a knock on the door about 10 o'clock from the local policeman, and he was with a neighbour, and they told me that he'd been found dead in his car that morning. So that really, that was the beginning of the end of my, my life dreams, really. I knew at that moment that I knew I would never have the family that I wanted. That was all gone. It was never going to happen. And so then I went on a search to try and find because I couldn't keep the farm anymore. We were chopping wood and, carrying water basically, and it was just too much. So I went on a search that lasted for years, really, to try and find, a reason to live, because I didn't want to live, but I had kids, so I couldn't really take myself out at that point. And I connected with some spiritual teachers in India. I traveled to India. I just was all over traveled around Australia trying to find a place to live. And I eventually found a place called Healesville, ironically, just out of Melbourne. And I made a life there. And through the community there, I heard about this particular, at the time he was calling himself a trance channel. And a trance channel is someone who, basically he's a trained actor. So he was just pretending to be all these different evolved beings and handing out information to people. And through a shamanic course that I did, I was guided to start training with him. And where I thought I'd met my guru and I was entering into his ashram, that was far from the truth. And I went to America to without my children, just to be with him for a month. And we ended up getting married, and then I took my children
Sorry, you got married to the leader of the transcendental movement?
Well, he was a trans channel, but he had his own organization, his foundation. So yeah, I did. I got married to him. I know it sounds all wacky, but that's just how it unfolded. And then we lived as a family in this group. There were other homes around, so it was the ashram was made up a number of different homes, and people would come for meetings and dinners, and he was the cult leader. So he's believing and convincing people that he's the second coming. He's the Maitreya Buddha, the Kalki avatar, the one that humanity's been waiting for, and we were all his disciples to serve. We were going to be serving his mission, and that's what I lived for 7 years. And it was absolute hell. It was torture. It was brainwashing, mind control, the whole lot. Psyops, gaslighting. He was a master of manipulation. And
so when you joined, I assume, sorry to cut you, I just wanted to get some more context and background. So you said your mom was atheist and hated God. So you basically had no foundation of faith. You didn't go to church. You didn't believe in God and all that. So,
no.
And then here you are marrying this cult leader. So this transcendental group, what was the basis of their belief? Did they believe in God? Or was it just that the leader was the God? And was it any way tied to Christianity? Or was it just something entirely different religion?
No, he's the second coming.
So he's the Messiah.
Yeah, he's the Messiah.
Wow.
And he's still running that scam. Yeah, so he's he's heard from God that it's him. He's the one. And so and he used all sorts of like eclectic religious garbage, from some Hindu chants to some more biblical stuff, but just really whatever worked for him, which was very dark, actually. He worked with a lot of dark energies, and what looked like, so if, for instance, if we had a disciple training, that might be like 8 hours of what he called processing, but it was people screaming and thrashing around, supposedly healing. And it was very, we had the police come to the house a few times, and it was very dark times for everyone. He handed out punishments if people didn't participate in a certain way, or we had assignments, and if they were late, there was punishments. And the children were the most punished. And he would do, they weren't punished in necessarily, and they weren't hit or, we don't know about the sexual abuse thing because all this came out later on, but they were punished like emotional abuse. And he would do things like tell my children that I loved them differently. We also had a child together, and that's a whole other messed up story I don't need to get into. But basically, he would tell my children that I loved one more than the other, which is so damaging.
So pitting them against you.
Beg your pardon?
No, so like pitting your children against you and against one another, making them feel like, wow.
It's a classic tactic of someone with a narcissistic personality disorder. My mum did it. My mum did it to me, where she triangulated my brothers and I, so we've never had a good relationship. We've always been there's been conflict, and that's what was happening with my children. And I was in hell because on one part of me knew that this was just felt wrong. Another part of me understood that on some level I was committed to my spiritual path, and this felt like what I needed to do for my the path that I was following. So it was torment.
Yeah.
And it turned out my parents knew I was in a cult within a year of me leaving Australia, but no one ever said anything to me, which is something that when I speak about the cult, I think it's important that people know that they're in a cult, because how else are you going to get out
Yeah.
if you don't know that
If you don't know.
you're in a
So
cult?
the thing I've found, Isabella, and I've heard from a lot of people who are in cults, is when you're in aid, you don't even know you're in a cult and I wanted to know your story. So how was it when this whole thing started out? Did it start out like, did they love bomb you? Did they look very promising and awesome? And then when you go in, then many years down the line, you begin to see all the red flags and the cracks. And at that point, it's too late, I guess, for some people. They feel like trapped. Oh, how can I get out? Because you're met with a lot of threats and things like that. So how was it at the onset?
That's exactly what you described. So there was love bombing, you're the most beautiful woman. I've been waiting lifetimes for you.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I thought had met my guru, because I understood that guru disciple relationship. It was something that I really wanted, because my spiritual path was so essential to me, primary.
Yeah.
And so I was open to having a guru. And I thought I was in an ashram. I'd been in ashrams before. I'd seen how they operate, how the disciples serve the guru and the guru serves the disciples. So it looked like an ashram. And then there was also, in addition to the love bombing, there's also the hate bombing too, that happens pretty
Mm.
quickly too. So there's that whole breakdown of the psyche starts to happen, where you just lose touch with I lost touch with who I was. I didn't trust my intuition, because he would say, I know you better than you know yourself. So I have to override my instincts and my intuition. And then there's all the mind games. He was a master of what I'm calling mind fuckery. There was all these, like, he would tell someone they're enlightened, and so everyone else in the cult gets sort of jealous over that, and he gives his attention more to this person, and just creates all these
Division.
tensions within the group. So he stays the one in control. He controlled what people ate, because we're all vegan. When people slept, supposed to wake up at 4 a.m. and do prayers to him, sing to him, or whatever. He controlled who married who had sex and who didn't. He gave people names and isolated people from their families, and classic cult tactics. And there was also a discussion in the cult of where the cult, it's not a cult or something like that. It's a joke. And there are all these other cults around, and all these other deluded individuals who believe they're the second coming, because he's not the only one. There are lots of people out there who
There are
have that
lots.
delusion,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
They have that delusion about themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so we would laugh about everyone else who was deluded, but
But not laugh at him. Not
he,
him. You guys,
he's the real one.
he's the real one.
Right.
My
And
God.
then it wasn't until a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about now, a lot of the things about him and how the cult operated, I found out later.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to point that out. Obviously, I didn't know really what was going on behind the scenes. Well, we had sex one time to consummate the marriage. I got pregnant. He never touched me again for the next 8 years. There was no physical intimacy at all. And he would use all these excuses, like I was too needy, or too much like a man, or I hadn't um, been nice enough to him, or I hadn't been obedient enough, so I didn't deserve his attention. And then he just defaulted to this is what's for your highest spiritual growth, is to be celibate. So that was happening. I'm in a celibate marriage, and it turns out he's actually grooming the boys and having sex with the male cult members, convincing them that they're gay, as well as being on Tinder and going to the gym and to Palm Springs and all that. So, I didn't find out that for years. Didn't find out about the grooming of the boys and the pedophilia. And it was actually that my son was, and I'm supposed to say it, but my son was murdered by, I'm alleging that he had my son murdered, made it look like a suicide, and blamed me and
Oh my
said
God.
that my son had found out he was gay and couldn't live with that fact, and knew I wouldn't accept that, and so he'd taken his life, and that just completely broke me out of cult programming. And I went along to see this guy. He'd been the cult counselor, because in addition to meetings, and we had to do all these things like kinesiology and body work and all that, because we're all such broken human beings. And one of the counselors had ended up, he left his role as the cult counselor because he'd seen through the lies of the cult leader. And I went to see him about 8 months after my son had passed away. I knew
I'm so sorry
you know,
about that. Oh my God.
yeah, it's pretty. And I walked in the door and he said, "You know you're in a cult, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't know I'm in a cult. I thought I was in an ashram with my guru." And he said, "Go home and Google cult characteristics and you'll see." So I went home and Googled cult characteristics, and sure enough, there's the list. Charismatic leader who's the arbitrator of truth, who controls everyone's movements, does isolation. I learned about psyops. I learned about narcissistic personality disorder. And of course, like check, check, check.
Yes. Yes.
I realized that that's exactly where I am. I'm in a cult, I'm brainwashed, and I have to get out. And then he used, we had a child, so I was hooked that way, because I wasn't legally supposed to move more than 2 hours away from where he lived, and I didn't even want to be in the country anymore. And then also he said that if I left him, because this is what this was my whole sole purpose, was to be with him and be living this divine family. If I left him, I'd be basically turning my back on God and my soul, myself, whatever. So I was torn, and it took me probably about a year after my son was murdered to actually leave. And I think that in the end he let me go, because he knew that if I wasn't, freed, I would have had another death on his hands, and he didn't want that. So I escaped to Hawaii, and I've been living here ever since, just trying to make sense of what happened, and healing from that experience.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing this story. Man, I can't even imagine the pain and torture you had to go through, losing yourself, losing your son, losing your mind, because
Yeah.
like you said, brainwashing is almost like someone else taking over agency of your mind, of your soul, of everything. Like you're just bound to them, and it took a lot of courage for you to even leave. So was it the death of your son that kind of broke that for you? And I know you said Googling, because again, I'm so glad about the internet and about YouTube and all the resources out there, right? Because sometimes you can feel isolated in what you're experiencing, but all you need to just go type, those characteristics on the internet or something. You see, you find people who are also in a similar situation as you are, and it helps, just seeing all of that, like attributes of a cult. Then it became clear to you, wow, I have been in a cult and I didn't even know that. So was it the death of your son that gave you so much strength and courage to leave? And after you left, so for the people behind, you said the cult still is in existence today, people still go there? Wow. So are you still in contact with people there, or is it like excommunication completely?
Well, of course, I've been demonized.
Yes.
He's the Christ, and I'm the Antichrist. So I'm the one that's standing in the way of him, the second coming actually coming forward. That's how powerful I am.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that's the sort of story he tells people. But yeah, what happened after I left was I was learning, like I was saying, through the internet, like learning about narcissistic personality disorder, learning about cult characteristics. And as I was doing that, in what I decided to do, instead of saying he's got a narcissistic personality disorder, which he does, and all this stuff about him, I had to look at myself. What does that mean if I've got into a relationship with someone with a narcissistic personality disorder and stayed? What does that mean about me? And I realized that it was basically because I didn't love myself. It was like narcissistic personality disorder is a self-love deficit disorder. It just manifests as it does with narcissists. And the other term that's used is codependency. I look outside of myself for love. So I knew that if I was going to end, he wasn't my first narcissist. I got into other relationships because that pattern of lack of self-love still was in me. So I
And you
worked
and you
really,
think it came from your mom, like being raised by a narcissist herself. So all
yeah,
of that, okay.
absolutely. Because the narcissist is incapable of love. They don't, people say they love themselves. They don't. They're incapable of feeling love. They have like a void of self-hatred that they try to fill through their like false personalities and energy vampirism and all their facade that they put on. That's how they get
Yeah.
their needs met. For me, it was getting the approval from other people. And
Mm.
so I worked on establishing self-love, which was really saying I love myself like all day long,
Hmm.
and treating myself, like talking to myself like I'm talking to a child, praising myself when I did things, and being gentle with myself. And it worked. Finally it worked, and I love myself now. It's still a work in progress, but I'm
Mm.
certainly not going to be taken in by a narcissist again.
Congratulations on that, because not many people can say that about themselves. Yeah, I mean, it's it's interesting the mind of how cult leaders operate. Like, why are they the way they are? I am subscribed to Netflix, and I know every time Netflix releases any documentary about cult leaders, like it's always trending. It's always like on my homepage as number one. And I think people are really interested. Like, what makes someone that way? What makes someone? Because it's one thing to be narcissistic, to have narcissistic personality disorder. Another thing to like go to the other extreme. I know it's on a spectrum, right? MPD is like a spectrum, but to get to that extent of wanting to control and rule people, wanting to gain agency or dominance over people's mind and hearts. I don't know what causes it, right? What kind of, I don't know. But what were some of the things, and this is just to help people, like, someone who might be in similar situation, to be aware of, okay, you might be in a cult. What are the signs of brainwashing? How does someone know that they're being, there's some brainwashing going on, and that they're in a cult or someone else is controlling or ruling their lives? What are the signs, and what should they look out for?
Well, firstly, I want to speak about why the cult leaders do what they do. Why those with narcissistic personality disorders can go from just living like what would seem like a fairly normal life to wanting to
Mm-hmm.
control the lives of people, because it's really treading in deep water when you want to take over and control other people's lives. You're taking on their karma, basically. And my understanding is, and I know this is uncomfortable for people, but there are invisible forces that affect us. Some people can talk about them as being, there are angels and there are demons. And these ones with narcissistic personality disorders who want to control people have demonic energies in them. They just do. And I've seen it. This cult leader who I was involved with was basically feeding his demons through controlling people, through having sex with people, through taking money from people. So he had this insatiable need to take from people, to take energy, money, innocence, mind rape, or whatever. That's a very demonic energy force that controls these people to do what they do, because there's nothing else that really explains the level of evil
Mm-hmm.
that happens within cults, from my way of understanding, beyond
Yeah.
childhood wounds, beyond they didn't get attention from mum or dad, or they were sexually abused when they were children. Like, there's actually a very dark force there. That's my best understanding of it. So, and then the other one, what you were asking about, the how to know you're in a cult.
Yes.
Well, how to know you're in a cult is to know that you're not free to make your own choices and decisions about things, that there are other forces like punishments or guidelines or rules or whatever that you have to follow in order to stay part of the group. And if you don't follow those orders or instructions or rules or whatever, then there are consequences for that. And basically, you're being told what to do, and you're not free. And then if you're told what to do over and over again, because one of the best forms of mind control is repetition. So having to repeat, we had to repeat his name over and over and over again, praises to him or whatever. So that's an obvious um, tactic that they use. The other one is called gaslighting. So gaslighting is a tactic it comes from this play that was written in the 30s, I think, when they were used gas lights to light the buildings in England. And the gentleman of the house was trying to make his wife think like she was going crazy, so he would adjust the level of gaslights, and she would comment on it, and he would say, oh, there's nothing happening. So it's a tactic now that's come into the common vernacular to describe tactics that make you lose your mind. So for instance, what he would do, I remember the first one now, I can remember the first one he did on me, was he sent me to the supermarket to buy, everything had to be this brand and that brand or whatever. So he told me what toilet paper to buy or whatever. I'm from Australia, I don't know. So I write it down, I went and got it. And when I got home, he said, that's not what I told you to get. And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, well, you did. And that happened all the time. We had that conversation. We didn't have that conversation. You said this, that happened. But, I can't even trust myself. I'm losing my mind. That gaslighting was one of his best tactics that he used to keep people believing his lies. The other one would be that people are held there by tithing or paying money. That's how he gets his money. So you're supposed to contribute to the cult or the religion or the multi-level marketing or the political party or whatever. So you pay money, and that guarantees your inclusion in the group, and also the increasing power of the leader. And then there's the whole like us and them scenario that gets built up where you're the chosen ones, or the whatever, this basically the special people, and everyone else is lesser than, and you're supposed to help them, sort of like you're in this benevolent position that creates a power differential that somehow you're better than other people. Keeps the cohesion going. And then there's the threats, if you leave, then all the worst stuff will happen to you. For me, I was threatened with, if I left, my other 2 children would die. That happens in, your mother will get sick and someone will get cancer, your children will go into prostitution or whatever. So he would just use whatever tactics he could to stop people from leaving. And then once you left, of course, you were demonized, and so people knew if they left, they'd be losing all their friends that they'd had for years. So there's a lot of those tactics he used every day.
And you mentioned triangulation as well. That's another huge one.
Yeah, absolutely. He had people, he would have these pairs, we'd get paired off, and then he would always have one person of the pair report back to him. So he basically, while he would pretend that he had psychic abilities, he was just getting information about people, what emotionality they were going through. He would interrogate the children to find out what was happening with people, and then use that information against them.
This is crazy. And those 7 years, those 7 years are years that it will take you years to recover from the experiences. So I was also going to ask, I'm going to ask you how you were able to heal and recover, because I know you said now you're you love yourself so much, which is very powerful. But I wanted to ask as well, so how can people, right, from the onset, because there are lots of this type of cults everywhere, they come out like sounding so good, wonderful, and then you get in. So how can people spot from the onset when someone is coming to talk to you about any kind of organization or movement or whatever? How can you even spot, even though they present as very normal, kind, love bombing you? What are the red flags, and what is the first thing that should put you on alert and should make you want to leave immediately? Because I find that the longer you stay, the harder it becomes for you to leave. But if maybe at the first month, second month, you realize it's easier for you to leave immediately than when you get ingrained in here. And I know for you, it wasn't easy because you were already married to this person. So you can't even.
The thing I'd be looking at is who controls the group and how they control it. So if it's just one person or like a small group of people who are at the top making decisions for everybody else, that's your first red flag. If there's kind of a select group that that has an inner circle that you don't really have access to, then that's a red flag that you're in a high control group. That's another word for a cult.
So you should go running for the hills. Don't even settle. Don't stay there at all. Wow, interesting.
Right. Well, that's the fact is, no one needs an intermediary between themselves and their higher power. You can call it God or Great Spirit or universe or whatever, but there is an intelligent, divine presence that's, well, for me, that I can feel, and relate with and speak with and communicate with. I don't need an intermediary between me and that intelligence. No one does. So any structure that puts someone, an intermediary, whether it's a religion or, like I said, a family, a relationship, if there's someone who's interceding or interfering with your relationship with the divine, then, or your higher power, whatever you want to call it, if there's someone in the way of that, then you're in a disempowered, problematic, potentially problematic situation. And like I said, that can show up in a family, in a relationship with another person. There are marriages that function as cults with one person who's controlling the situation. And if you're not free to make your choices, then you're in a disempowered, you're in a control situation. And it's very common, really, for people to be one person wanting to control situations. And I'm seeing it more and more common. That whole narcissistic personality disorder is almost like a pandemic.
It's really scary, honestly. It's really scary. I'm a Christian, and the Christian faith preaches, Jesus Christ is the Messiah, he's the Savior, he's the only way to God, right? And when Jesus died, the Bible says he tore, because before Jesus came, we had intermediary between man and God. So you couldn't go to God yourself. You had to go through a priest, through a prophet to speak the mind of God to you. But when Jesus came, he broke all of those rules. So as Christians, we can go directly to God. We don't need that intermediary. The only reason why we go to church, which is like an organized group, is because there's also beauty in coming together, people with similar minds, similar faith coming together to worship together. But that is not to say that as a Christian, you cannot independently hear God from yourself. And that's the beauty about Christianity I love. Granted that there are some Christian groups that also function like what you're talking about, like cults, and someone takes precedence and preeminence over every other person, which is not right. It's not what the Bible preaches. So I think it's important, like you said, for people to be aware. Anyone trying to, wanting to be in control, wanting to tell you, oh, I'm the intermediary between you and the higher power, between, you and God. There's a problem there.
Right.
Yeah.
Telling you how to live your life, what to do with your body, that
Mm-hmm.
it's all just between you and God, those sorts of things.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So your parents now, so is your mom still atheist? And did they ever fall into any of this type of cults, or they're just living their
My
lives?
mother has passed, which was a great blessing and
What about
relief for
that?
me, because she was really quite an evil presence in my life. And she, as I was leaving the cult, she completely ostracized me from the family, because I think basically because she'd known all along that she knew I was in a cult. And
Mm.
actually, she knew that there was sexual abuse going on in the cult, because my son had reported that to her. And so I think that she felt pretty guilty that she hadn't done anything. She had the resources, the money, the time, we've got 5 lawyers in the family, that at no point there was nothing done to raise my awareness to it, or you know I think one thing about being in a cult that I would have appreciated is if there was hard evidence presented in front of me, like put a PI on the guy, have him photographed at, doing his Tinder hookups or whatever. Let's do a forensic accounting so we can see the bank accounts and see that he's bleeding money and buying properties behind my back. And if I had the evidence presented to me, I think that I would have made different choices. I'm not going to blame anyone for it or whatever, but there was a lot of missed opportunities, I think. And what I've learned is, like I said before, just let people know that they're in a cult in the way that's that where there's proof, whether it's someone else who's escaped the cult who can present their testimony, or, like I said, some more hard evidence. But otherwise, we don't know. That's the
Yeah.
whole point of the cult, is to keep people unaware of the control that's going on.
Yeah, and isolated from people who will tell them the truth. Because I
Right.
imagine if maybe your parents had told you as well, you probably wouldn't, and again, your situation is different because you were married to this person. So it's a bit more complicated.
And also, in their defense, I was crazy. I really was. You can hear from the story, and I wasn't in my right mind. And I was extremely vulnerable. for cult programming. You know, my husband had passed away. I was in searching for a family, was searching for a spiritual teacher. So it all dovetailed perfectly. But I was, I was out of my mind. I was crazy right from the start. So they probably would have had a pretty hard time reaching me.
Yeah. How did all of this impact your children?
Horribly, horribly. They've been ostracized from me. So the whole cycle of parent child relationships being broken apart has continued on to the next generation, which is, it's really heartbreaking. But that's something else I'm learning too. Apparently there's actually a what you call it, like a movement of parental alienation or abandonment. That the 30 somethings, there's a lot of, they're abandoning their parents. They just don't want to be controlled or told what to do. And also they don't want to look after their parents. So there's this wave of people, parents and grandparents, who are being ostracized by their children. And yeah, I'm shocked by that. I thought it was just me, but I've been online on YouTube and find there's a lot of channels now that are dealing with parental abandonment. So the wounds of what happened through my childhood and the cult and all that, are passing on to the next generation. It's really heartbreaking. Yeah.
Well,
But
yeah.
I wanted to talk about what I found was the best healer for me and my heart was to spend time in nature. And that's happened through living here in Hawaii, being surrounded by natural beauty. Just that has helped heal my heart, and I'm now at the point where I'm no longer suffering. It doesn't mean that I don't feel sadness, anger, and those sorts of negative emotions, but I used to suffer all the time. I just wanted to die and not wanted to, participate in life. And now, just from being surrounded by the beauty of nature, also being directly connected to the earth. So I have worn shoes for about 8 years. It's called grounding. It's a way of rebalancing electromagnetically as well as physiologically and psychologically, being directly connected to earth energy. It's essential. We're human beings in this animal body, and we need to be sourced by the earth, which is a giant battery. So I've been doing that practice, and I've also been sun gazing every morning. Pretty much every morning when the sun comes up, I take the sunlight into my eyes, which hits my pineal and pituitary glands, and that, I don't know, it works some kind of magic, expands my consciousness. There's light codes and optimizing information, and so I've done that practice, and that increases my energy. It lifts my mood and brings me information. I've just finished publishing this book.
Nice.
So I'll get a lot of information that way. And the other thing that I've been doing is...
What's the name of the book? I'm going to put it in the description so that people can...
It's called New Human of New Earth.
New Human of New Earth. Okay.
Yeah. And so I've also connect to nature through eating living foods like sprouts, and I grow some of my own food. So I get that basic information into my body, and that helps optimize my physical body. And also drinking pure spring water or clean rainwater or blessed water or whatever. So I just surrounding myself with plants inside as well as outdoors. But it's all the different energies and healing modalities that come through nature. When I'm outside, I'm taking in the energy of the wind, the energy of the waves, the energy of the sun, and that is transforming me. I know it. It's transforming me from my DNA upwards and expanding my consciousness, so that now I can see that those same tactics that were used on me in the cult, the brainwashing, the mind control, the psyops and the gaslighting, I can see how those tactics are being used on us, on humans, on a global scale. I can see how the brainwashing happens through the television, the movies, the internet, the cell phone usage, video games. Like, that's all changing our brains and reprogramming us to think certain ways about what's happening on the planet, all that sort of. And then there's the when we don't have adequate nutrition, like happened in the cult, probably because everyone was eating not much, and we're compromised when we're not properly
That's true.
hydrated or with the nutrition. And that happens to people too. There's most food is toxic because it's highly processed and people aren't drinking pure water. So that makes us weaker, susceptible to illness and also to mind control, behavior modification, and all that. So I can see how these, and also the systems that we trust that are organizing our society through the education and the religions and the legal system, science, and the monetary system, like banking and all those systems, they are systems of control. They're keeping us limited. They're keeping us doing this 9 to 5, crunching, working, busy, and with no time to really very little time to enjoy life or to pursue healing or spiritual growth and evolution. So we're being held in this, like, basically a cult.
The system, yeah.
Yeah, the systems are parts of a cult, and most people have no clue about that. The fact that the government is, that's a system of control, really. It's pretty obvious. It's getting, those things becoming more and more obvious, that we're not being supported by these systems. The evolution of humankind is being thwarted, we're actually devolving in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? And that's because we're being controlled to not be able to reach our full potential, not be able to be the divine humans that we're here to be. We're basically just scrabbling around trying to survive. We're really, that's not our birthright. Our birthright is to be these magnificent beings who are here to work in cooperation with nature and each other to bring forth really abundant, beautiful lives, because this planet's an absolute jewel that can feed everyone and can house everyone, and your life can be abundant. So that's what I've come to see as a result of my cult experience, and then continuing to expand my consciousness through the sun gazing, and then also through meditation, through breath work, and through entheogens, which are sacred plant medicines. So, just to continue to see more of life, because, we only see a small
Mm-hmm. We know in
percentage
part.
of whatever,
Yeah.
of what really is. That we don't really, there's a lot we don't, there's more what we don't know than what we do
Yes.
know. And so by continuing to expand, I've continued to understand and see more. And that's what I got to see.
Wow.
But then
Interesting.
the other thing that I've come to understand, in addition to being able to see the control systems that are keeping us basically in the dark, so we don't really know who we are or why we're here or what's going on we think we do, but like what's really going
Mm-hmm.
on in the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
We also can't see is the fact that the light that's coming from the sun and from the great central sun and galactic center, that's increasing in frequency, and that's measurable and is being measured by the solar activity. So now we're getting higher intensity solar flares that used to happen in, say, a 6-month period are now happening in 1 month. The sun is just throwing off all these like solar flares and plasma and increasing the frequency of light that's hitting the planet. And the planet also has a measured vibration, a frequency, and it's called the Schumann resonances. And that used to be at 7.84 hertz, and it was like an average of the frequencies that are coming to the earth as a result of lightning, or just that all the energies that come from elsewhere send off this 7.84 hertz frequency. Now that's being clocked at like 50 to 80 hertz. So that frequency is increasing. Measurement, there's been particles of the highest vibration have been measured. So basically the whole frequency of the cosmos is on
Out of whack.
upward at the moment. So while we're seeing a lot of the dark side of life, the fact it's because there's more light coming in to expose that, and that light is going to continue to increase in frequency. And so all these structures that have held us in place are going to end. They're going to break us free. And we will at some point be living as sovereign beings, as divine sovereign beings on a new earth in a different way, where we are supporting each other and taking care of each other and taking care of the earth. That will happen. We just actually came out of this in the Hindu time cyclic, and we've just come out of this dark cycle called the Kali Yuga. In fact, just the other day, apparently, this guy who studied it And we're now going into an upward swing where it's the evolutionary phase of our trajectory, and it's called the Dwapar Yuga. So yeah, things are, while they look like it looks like there's more chaos, and there probably is, and there's a lot of like cults being exposed and corruption being
Yeah.
exposed on all levels. That's like right on target for shifting out of.
So you think all of these planetary activities and movements and changes is probably what is causing all of this exposure and enlightenment to humanity and all that. So what would you say, what religion would you say you practice now? Because you sound like, what would you say you practice now?
I don't have a religion. I would
Okay.
say I have a spiritual like relationship with life, with God, with nature. So it's more of a, I think what I've come to understand, it's more probably like an indigenous worldview, where I can feel the life and the consciousness in nature. I can feel it teaching me, guiding me, protecting me, directing me, sourcing me. So that's my main
Okay.
relationship
Okay.
through
But you
nature,
believe in God, like the creator who created the whole earth and is in control and in charge of everything happening
but
right
not
now.
that force is no way personified. It's an intelligent, infinite force, but it doesn't have like necessarily human qualities. I wouldn't call it he or she.
Yeah.
Permeates everything.
Yeah.
And
God,
my little human mind cannot even comprehend exactly
and then,
what
yeah,
it
yeah,
is, but I
yeah.
have that's my primary relationship that guides me through
Hmm.
every day.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I feel like it's so deep, and I'm sure a lot of people would identify and relate with it. So I wanted to ask about your. I know you have a graduate degree in outdoor education and things like that. So did you ever get to practice working while you were married or afterwards? Because I know now you probably don't subscribe to the 9 to 5 ideology, but were you ever able to practice what you studied
Yeah,
in your
I
previous
did.
life?
I worked as an outdoor educator using outdoor education or adventure activities like
Mm-hmm.
hiking or climbing or skiing. I used it. We had a program, that outdoors program, and it was for young people who had a psychiatric diagnosis, like manic depression. That was back in the day, what it was called then, or schizophrenia. And they would come on this long-term program, and we would do those outdoor activities, building up from like a half-day walk to a 5-day walk. And the purpose was to increase people's confidence,
Mm-hmm.
increase their self-esteem, and it's a really powerful medium to really change people. And with my first husband, we also worked in that field. In fact, he was on the riding the crest of the wave, introducing those outdoor adventure activities into the corporate world. So taking companies out into the wilderness and having them do problem solving, so that they would there was team building, and that would increase their communication and also personal development. So I got to
Sister Bay.
use my knowledge and passion for the outdoors
Mm-hmm.
at that point. And then when I became a mother, I decided that I was just going to be the mother.
Mm.
And so I was blessed to be able to do that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and then
Wow.
the irony is, now I've come back to writing about the benefits of nature for improving mental health and physical health. So it's like I've
Yeah.
come in a
Okay.
big circle back to what I'm really passionate about, and that's the power of nature and in healing, in optimizing our life. In fact, it's not possible to be an optimally healthy human being, either mentally or physically or spiritually, without spending some time in nature,
Oh,
some time bare
nature.
feet on earth. It's essential. We have to have
It
sunlight on our
is.
skin, in our eyes. We have to feel the wind on our skin. We have to
Mm-hmm.
do that. And if we're like spending money on supplements or therapists or whatever, and they're not doing these basic practices like grounding or sun gazing or just being lying on the earth or eating natural foods, kind of wasting time, really, because these are fundamental principles of health that they've really been overlooked and forgotten and thought it's too easy, or that it doesn't really matter. But it really does matter to
It
be
really does.
connecting to nature as much as possible. Like bring more, if you can't get outside or it's snowy or whatever, you can still touch trees. That's going to give you the same energy as being grounded, because trees go into the earth. You can bring plants inside. You can, like I said, eat living foods. There's lots of ways to be connected to nature, even if you are living in a city or living somewhere where there's, inclement weather or whatever, but it's essential. There are products that are being developed that can provide the benefits of grounding, like grounding sheets, grounding mats. But the best thing is just to get outside, put your feet walk on the beach, feet on the grass.
Let the sun touch you, touch your skin.
Absolutely, it's so important. People are spending way too much time inside now relating to screens. So just go outside and be looking at the trees, looking at the birds, looking at the clouds, just doing like human things. Cook some
Yeah.
food, eat it outside on the grass, sit, talk
Just
with it.
simpler life. Like what you're describing just reminds me of, probably I wasn't born then, but I imagine life in the 50s, or like before technology, before screens became a thing, right? People were just outdoors. Yeah, I mean, right here where I live in Oregon, we don't have a lot of sunshine, and we have more rain, especially in the winter months. So when it's sunny, like we're getting into that season of sunshine, it's just like the feeling is just different. Like so much joy and love, and just looking out and seeing the bright, it's beautiful. So yeah, I totally understand what you're saying about nature.
And remember to take children outdoors, because children are now
Yeah.
growing up we've got two generations of human
Hmm.
beings now who relate to life
Hmm.
more through screens than they do through the natural world. And that's frightening, where it's not meant to be relating to life through a screen.
I
That's
know.
It's actually interfering with our experience of life. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought about this the other day, that when I was feeling the wind on my skin or just through my hair, whatever, I thought kids are missing out on these subtleties of life, of the, like the subtle taste of a ripe piece of fruit, or the tickle of grass on the feet, or
Mm-hmm.
the shine of the moon, or whatever it is. We really are being seriously disadvantaged by relating to life more through screens, spending time indoors, and rather than being human.
Yeah, interesting. I think I've learned so much from, our discussion today. So I know you talked about your book a little bit. Is there anything you wanted to mention about that? And also, what will be your final word or advice to anyone listening? Anyone who's been in a cult, or is just on the verge of joining one? What word of warning will you give to them? And yeah, and where can people find your book?
So my book's available on Amazon. It's called New Human of New Earth. And my advice would be, if you want a deeper understanding of some of the things I've been talking about, it's all in my books is my best effort to talk about what's going on, but also all the medicines that are available to us, the hundreds of medicines that are available to us in our bodies, like our breath or movement, or like what we can eat to optimize our health. So the medicines that are available also through nature, and highly recommend using all those natural medicines to continue to optimize our health, because we really are under attack here. There's so much toxicity in the food, the water, the air, and it's really important for us to be as empowered and as healthy as possible. My book's got all my best information in there. Meanwhile, my advice is to spend as much time in nature or directly connected to nature as possible. So that could be going outside and lying on the grass just as often as possible, or put your back up against a tree and sit there and read a book. Just really be as human as possible, as often as possible, and just receive the energy of nature, because it is healing, and we don't have to know what's going on. We don't have to understand it all, but trust that, well, nature, God is a benevolent force, does want us to live as like the best life possible. So to avail ourselves of that energy is the best thing we can do. And to receive the most energy, it's important to be as relaxed as possible. Because when we're relaxed, then we're in the most receptive state. And whatever it is that we need can sources, and then we can, whatever it is that we don't need can be released and can continue to heal and evolve.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much. Thanks for all of that advice and information and all that. Really appreciate you coming here. Thanks for being so vulnerable and sharing your story. I know it must not have been easy, but thanks for sharing it with us. And I'm sure people out there will definitely, learn a thing or two from it and also maybe relate with it as well. So thank you so, so much, Isabella. I really appreciate your time here. Do you have any other last word before we close out?
I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be a guest on your podcast and share my experiences and what I've learned, and also for the fact that you provide this platform for people to share information that can help others, because that's a really beautiful service. So thank you for your contribution to a better world. Really appreciate that, because I appreciate that all the effort that it takes to lead up to the podcast and do the podcast and then produce it. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for your presence. Really appreciate that, Zuki.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Isabella. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much, viewers, for watching or listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, leave us a review wherever you're listening from. And please go buy Isabella's book, engage with our work. Do you have social media handles like Instagram or
I've got
Facebook?
a YouTube channel called Feeling Better Naturally. So a
Okay.
lot of information on there, as well as images of nature, which can be of benefit if you can't get outside.
I see. Okay. I'm going to get all of that information and I'm going to put it in the show notes of the podcast and the YouTube video description box as well. Thank you so much, viewers, and we hope to see you in our next episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.